begun in a good way, with a lot of hatzlacha. I've mentioned a number of times already, different places, that Rav Moshe was always a little sad when the month of Nissan was over, because he said, Nissan is the Chodesh HaGeula. Ben Nissan nigalu, ben Nissan asidin ligoel. And although Mashiach could come every day, except Shabbos, Yom Tov, but Nissan is the higher probability. So every time Nissan passed, Rav Moshe had a certain tsar that the highest probability of Geula is no longer here. So Iyar was a little sad for him. But it's brought down that Iyar is also a month of Refuah. It's Rashi Tevis. Ani is the Aleph. Yud Yud is Hashem. Rofecha, I am God who heals you. And Refuah is Kailel, Refuah Nefesh, and Refuah Saguf. So it's not just for sickness, but that our Neshama should be healed and be able to absorb the Torah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And since the year is also the Hachana for Shavuos, the largest, it's the only complete month that prepares us for Shavuos, right? Nisan is only partial, and Sivan is only partial. So in a sense, this is a special month for the Hachana of Kabbalah HaTorah during the Sfira Sa'imer period. So B'Yeshes Hashem, all of us should be zeichet to grow in our Torah learning. So we're still in Perek Aleph of the Even Shleima, and the Perek Aleph is really devoted. Now again, just to remind people, it's been a while, that the Even Shilemah, not Even Shlomo, it's Even Shilemah. Although one might think if you're Litvak, you would say it's Shilemah anyway, even if it was Shlomo, but but it actually is the Even Shilemah. And just to remind you, Even Shilemah is actually a phrase from a pasuk. It's a pasuk of the Torah. When the Torah talks about accurate weights and measures, and they used to use stones as weights, Even Shilemah, your stone should be complete. It shouldn't be missing the necessary weight. So it was a pun that when Rav Shmuel Maltzin, who was a Chashuva Talmid Chacham in Vilna, wanted to be ma'asef, an anthology of the lessons of the Vilna Gaon, so he chose Even Shleima because it was a pun, that this is like a perfect list of how do you achieve Shleimus. But in addition, as the Rokeach says, it's good to be Marames, the name of a Mechaber and the name of his Sefer. So Even Shilemah, if you do it Rashi Tevis, could be read Eliyahu ben Shlomo Zalman. The Vilna Gaon's name was Eliyahu ben Shlomo Zalman. So it's kind of a double meaning there. But remember that the Gra, this is not the actual words of the Gra. The Gra did not write a sefer called Even Shilemah. Rather, Rav Shmuel Maltzin and then his son, who was actually a well-known Gaon in Pesach, Rav Yitzchak Maltzin, very much enlarged it. It's hard to know. I've never seen, I was looking for it, I was curious. I've never seen the actual first edition of the Even Shleima of Rav Shmuel Maltzin, which was actually much smaller. We only have the enlarged version of Rav Yitzchak Maltzin, so I don't know exactly how much was added, but apparently a lot was added. And this is an anthology. The primary makor, though, is the Perish Hagra and Mishlei, which we have. That is the primary makor. But many other places are added as well, particularly the Gra's commentaries on Zohar, Tikkunei Zohar. The Gra wrote commentaries. That's also a very big, very Shir Hashirim. That's a very big source. Okay, but the actual Lashonis, remember, are not the Lashonis of the Gra himself, which is important because whenever something is a paraphrase and it's not a quote, so you have less of an ability to be medayek, mamish, in the Lashon, because it's not the Lashon of the Gra. But the truth of the matter is, a lot of things are not the Lashon of the Gra. I mean, the parish of the Gra and Mishlei is not the Lashon of the Gra. The parish of Gra and Mishlei was published after his death by a Talmud, Rav Menachem Mendel of Shklav, who wrote over in his words what the Gra said. So he was a direct Talmud who heard it from the Gra, but he said it was his words. And he read it. He read it to the Gra afterwards, and he says the Gra was maskim. But he does say an interesting thing. In the parish on Mishlei, there is a lot of Kabbalah. I mean, there's Pshat and a lot of Kabbalah. And he says, whenever I wrote Kabbalah, I put down the exact words. I didn't paraphrase. When it wasn't Kabbalah, I put down my words, and the Gra was maskim afterwards. So it's kind of a mixture. I think the case was that the Gra stopped writing. I think this was the Cheshbon. He stopped writing anything himself after the age of 40. He only wrote until the age of 40, because after 40, there was too much to write. He couldn't, the Chachmas HaTorah was like an overflowing spring, that he wasn't shaykh for him to write anything, and the like. So Kimat, everything we have from the Gra is primarily Talmidim writing it down, and the like. Sometimes he was maskim, sometimes he heard it, sometimes they wrote it, he didn't hear it. Sometimes they wrote it and he disagreed. He said to correct it, whatever. Although it's interesting, just digress for a moment. In Hasidus, in Chabad in particular, and again, I hope the Gra will be meichel me for bringing up Chabad in Evan Shleima. But there are two types, I don't know if you're familiar with this, there are two types of talks that a Rebbe gives, that a Chabad Rebbe gives. One is called a Maimer, and one is called the Sicha. And the last Rebbe, 90% of what he said was Sicha. If you ever look Likutei Sicha, so he gave very, very few Mamorim. And the difference is, it's hard for us to know. I mean, one could say a Maimer is much deeper, much more mystical. But the way Chabad understands it, a Maimer, like the Navi, is the Rebbe is like a Navi that is possessed by a Ruach HaKodesh. And it just comes out. And that's why there's a whole ceremony before a Maimer is delivered. There's certain hachanas. A Sicha is also, could be very, very complicated and very, very erudite, but it's not as mystical, so to speak, as a Maimer. So the Chabad Rebbe's before the Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, for example, most of what he gave that was written down are Mamorim, Mamorei Admar HaZaken. And other Rebbeim were half and half. The last Rebbe, I guess because the reason is because he was talking 10 times more than his predecessors. I mean, he was talking all the time, so maybe it wasn't shaykh to have Mamorim, so overwhelmingly they're Sichos. So it's interesting that Hasidim have a position that the Maimer is not even the Rebbe anymore, it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So they say a machloket by the Tzemach Tzedek, who was the third Chabad Rebbe, that he gave a Maimer, and the Talmidim were arguing, in a Chavrusa, they were arguing, what's the pshat in the Maimer? Is the pshat in the Maimer this, or the pshat in the Maimer that? So somebody said, let's ask the Rebbe what the pshat in the Maimer is. So they asked the Rebbe for the pshat in the Maimer, and the Rebbe said pshat in the Maimer, like one of the guys, and the other guy says, I don't know, who says the Rebbe could interpret the Maimer? The Maimer is like Min HaShamayim, and the Rebbe has a deo, like anyone else, as to what the Maimer means, but he's not a balabas over the Maimer. It comes like Min HaShamayim. That was such a thing, ad kedei kach, which means in theory, if you write over somebody's Torah and they say you're wrong, you can say, well, who are you to say that I'm wrong? I mean, who says you have pshat in what you said? Okay, so I don't know how that would work with the Gra and the like, but there are a number of cases where the Gra told a person that you misunderstood my kavana and you have to rewrite it. So we have times the Gra was maskim. Of course, almost everything we have, the Gra was maskim, because if we weren't maskim, we don't have it anymore. But there were occasions where it's recorded that a Talmud misunderstood, and therefore it had to be rewritten. Because again, the Gra didn't waste words. The Gra was very, very makatzer, and it would be very. All of his Talmidim were Gedalim. The Gra did not have like Hamonam Talmidim, except one day a year. I'll mention that. But even a great Talmud Chacham could misunderstand. One day a year, everybody had the opportunity to be a Talmud of the Gra. Maybe not one day a year, but they say in Vilna, when a shul would start a new shir, he was encouraging a lot of, Batei Knesses to start shiurim for working people, for balabatim. So he himself was responsible for many shiurim in Ein Yaakov, which is Agadata, in Chayei Adam, which is his own brother-in-law, and basic halacha, etc. So to be machshav the Inyan, he always gave the first shir. So if a shul was having a new Ein Yaakov shir, he would go to the shir and give the first shir. So that was a rare opportunity that if you were a working balabas, you could actually hear a shir from the Vilna Gaon. Now, the Nitziv, on the other hand, actually gave a chumash shir to Balabatim every day. It's very interesting. The Nitziv, who married the granddaughter of Rav Chaim Volozhiner in Volozhin, the Nitziv had two jobs. One job was, of course, the Rosh Yeshiva of Volozhin, but the Nitziv was also the Rav of Volozhin. He was the Rav of the city. And the truth is, he spent more time on the yeshiva than on the city per se. There were dayanim who were involved, but theoretically, he was the Rav of the city. So, for example, on Rosh Hashanah, the first day of Rosh Hashanah, he was in yeshiva. The second day of Rosh Hashanah, he would go to the biggest shul in Volozhin, things like that. So, one of the things he did as Rav of Volozhin was every day he would give a chumash shir to Balabatim after Shachris. And it was designed to be understood by everybody, even by people who are relatively not so great in learning. But the Nitziv was very but he kept the shir day, every single day. And those chum shiurim became the basis of one of the great meforshim of the Acharayim, the Hamek Dover. Hamek Dover is the Nitziv's commentary on Chumash, that is based on the Chumash shiurim that he gave every day. What did he say? He once said, he was comparing himself to another great gadol. He says, this great gadol is not happy unless he says a chiddush on the Ketzos HaChoshen. He says, I'm very happy if I could say a little chiddush on Chumash and Rashi. He says, that makes me even happier, he said. So he said, you have to go back to the Chumash. Okay. So let's go back to the Even Shleima. So Perek Aleph is discussing the importance of Midos. And let's start again from Sif Hey. I think we did it, but just to get us back into it. It says, Hamidos hein lefi teva haguf v'hanefesh. Midos. I remember the Midos are rooted in the four elements. We have Mayim, which is kind of taiva, pleasure. And then we have eish, which is either enthusiasm or anger. There's a good and a bad aspect to each of these. And then there's ophor, which in its good incarnation is humility, and in its negative incarnation is laziness and yish, and or depression, yish. And ruach. Ruach is wind, air, which in its good incarnation is spirituality, that you're menatek yourself from Gashmias. In its bad incarnation, Ruach is referred to Gaiva, Ruach Gavaya, and the like. So depending on how these are configured in my guf and in my animal soul, that's called the Nefesh, those are the Midos that I'm born with. So the Midos are based on the nature of the guf and the nature of the Nefesh. Now, this is a little hard to understand. It's not clearly explained. Remember that there are multiple levels of the soul. In Kabbalah, there are 5 levels, but the Gra is primarily dealing with 3 levels. We have Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama. In fact, it's often abbreviated Naran. You'll see the Rashi Teva, Naran, and Nefesh HaChaim, and the like. So Nefesh is identified with what you might call the animalistic soul, but not in the sense of the Balatanya. The Balatanya, maybe I'll address it as more of a complicated typology. But this is simply the biological soul. Maybe I shouldn't even use the word animal soul because it's too reminiscent of the Balatanya. Now, it's the soul that runs my body. It's the soul that gives me life to move my arms, my digestive system, my lungs, whatever it would be. So that's the Nefesh. The Nefesh is the biological soul, the animating soul, maybe rather than animal soul. I'll talk about what the Balatanya means in a moment. Now, we then have a higher level of soul that's called the Ruach. And the Ruach enters the realm of emotion and feeling. So Hergish comes from the Ruach, right? The notion of emotion and feeling. And then we have the Neshama, that's the highest level of soul within me, and that refers to the intellect and the ability to understand Torah, understand HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay? So we have the guf, and we have 3 layers of Neshama. And the truth is, this is the basic typology of Kabbalah, except Kabbalah adds 2 more levels. But the difference is these 3 levels are within you. Within me is Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, but there are 2 levels of soul that are makif me, that surround me, connecting me to Hashem. There is what is called the Chaya. Chaya is a life force, and then above that is Yechida, which is the uniqueness of your particular connection to God. Now, the Chaya and the Yechida are really outside of us. They're a light that surrounds us. And the truth of the matter is, I don't know if I'm accurate, I don't even think the Chaya and the Yechida are even mentioned in the Even Shleima at all, because they're not really what we're working with. We're working with the Nefesh, the Ruach, and the Neshama. Now, the Baal Tanya, just as an aside, it's not Nogea, the Even Shleima itself. Everybody knows, because everybody has learned the first parak of Tanya. Like it's always true, it always strikes me. You take any Gemara off a shelf, any Masechta, well, really almost any Masechta, and you'll always see the first 2 dafim are well used. You open up the middle, not so well used. So what's the pshat? People start things. I mean, I include myself. People start things and they don't finish. So everybody has learned the first Rashi on Bereshis. Everyone, we know that. And everybody has learned probably the first parak of Tanya, because everybody starts Tanya, although it's hard to finish. So everyone knows from the first parak of Tanya that the Baal Tanya talks about 2 souls within a person, 2 souls. And he doesn't use the word Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama. He refers to that. Avada, he uses those terms, but that's not the 2 souls. He says there's a Nefesh Bahamis, there is an animal soul, and then there's a Nefesh Elokis, there's the godly soul. And life is a struggle between those 2 Nefesh. So there, when he uses Nefesh Bahamis, he is not using Nefesh to distinguish it from Ruach and Neshama. Rather, he's using Nefesh to distinguish it, essentially Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara. And what he does is, he actually says that the 3 levels of the soul exist in 2 versions. Meaning, the Nefesh Behemoth will include a Nefesh Ruach Neshama Behemoth and a Nefesh Ruach Neshama Elokis. So it's a different division, meaning he's creating a parallel universe structure, which we're not discussing here. We're now discussing the basic structure, which is Nefesh Ruach Neshama. So Nefesh is the biological function, Ruach is the emotional function, and Neshama is the intellectual, godly function. Now, it starts off saying the Midos that you're born with are based on Guf and Nefesh, because they're part of your basic biological personality. But then the parentheses is very interesting. Umishtanim, but they are changed, lefi ma'aseyim, according to your deeds, in the first incarnation you were in, v'hamasim lefi yarach. So again, to put this together, maisim, meaning maisim tovim or averos, they come from the Ruach. The Midos come from Nefesh Guf. Maisim come from the Ruach. Now, this actually makes perfect sense. Think about it. When a person does a Maisa, it's a product of them having a desire to do something. It's the Ratzain within a person that is molded the decision to either do something or not do something. My Ratzain might be makokol and be influenced by negative things, so it's a Maisa Aveira, or not doing a mitzvah, or my Ratzain might be to do a good thing, right? So what is the koach within me that determines my Maisim? It's my Ruach. So what's interesting is there is a relationship between the Ruach and the Nefesh, in the sense that the Ruach determines your Maisim, But your maisim, in turn, can change your midas. So the midas come from the nefesh, but they will be mishtana based on the maisim lefi haruach. And that's why, because of Gilgal, you may be born with different midas, right? If you believe in Gilgal, reincarnations, you will be born with different midas in each Gilgal, hopefully better, because what you're born with is a product of the Ruach, right? In other words, kind of your Nefesh in the next Gilgal will be a product of your Ruach in the preceding Gilgal. Right? So that's the hope would be your Masakein. So as a result, your Midos will be upgraded. Of course, it could be the opposite way too. Okay? So that's the interesting relationship between the Midos are benefesh ubaguf, but the Maisim are lefi haruach, and in turn, the Maisim will be mashpia on the Nefesh in the next Gilgal as to what the Midos of the Nefesh are going to be next time around. Now, just generally, this is also making the well-known point, certainly not a chiddush of the Gra, that Maisim are mashpia on Midos. This is a very, very important yesod in Judaism. We tend to think that a person's actions are reflective of their personality, but the Sefer Achinuch already says, and earlier than him as well, that Adam nifal kefi pulosav, we become influenced by our actions. Our actions are not just a product of our feelings and emotions and midas, but our actions are formative of those midos and the like. So if a person is cruel, he can become more of a Baal Chesed by literally giving. That's why there's a very fascinating Rambam in Pirkei Avos. This is not in the Mishnah Torah, and you'll see in a moment that halachically it's not even clear that we would paskin this way. But the Rambam says if a person has $1,000, I'll use dollars. A person has $1,000 to give to tzedakah, is it better to give $1,000 to a yeshiva or to an ani, or to give $1 each to 1,000 persons? So the Rambam says, better to give $1 each to 1,000 people, because what is mechanech you is not the size of your actions, but the number of repetitions that you have. To have to give 1,000 times will be a more powerful refiner of character than to give once a large sum of money, because it's together. It's the repetitions. I don't know if there's an analogy by weightlifting, whatever it is. What's better, the repetitions or the heavy weight? But the Rambam is saying here, the repetitions are the thing that develop your character, much more than the size of the action that you're doing. Now, the reason why I say halachically there's a problem with this is that it all depends on why are you giving tzedakah? Meaning, if I'm giving tzedakah because I want to be masake in my midas, so there the Rambam Taka says, giving $1 1,000 times will have a bigger hashpah on your midas than giving $1,000. But you see, that's not the only reason I give tzedakah. I also give tzedakah to help people. Now, here's the issue. I give $1, I give a penny, $1 to 1,000 people, or I give a penny to 10,000 to 100,000 people. So I really have been mechanech myself, right? I've done it 100,000 times. But what have I accomplished? So everybody has a penny, everybody has $1. What are they going to do with it? If I give $1,000 to a mishpacha, or $1,000 to a yeshiva, I'm doing a lot more good. So you have to understand that the Rambam was not necessarily giving us a halacha pesuka that you should give $1 to 1,000 people. It could very well be in Huchay Tzedakah, it's better to give more money to one person than a little bit of money to a lot of people. But he just means if your goal is to be mechanech yourself in a midah tova, that is when repetition will be it. But that's not always going to be the goal. And of course, and the question then becomes, well, so when can I say that's my goal and when shouldn't I say that's my goal? That's a good question, right? In other words, when am I allowed to kind of say,
okay, I will do less good with my money by spreading it out in smaller amounts in order to be madrich my midas. I mean, I'm raising this as a question. I mean, can I do that with 50% of my tzedakah money? Or 10% of my tzedakah money? Or all of my tzedakah money? Like, how do you allocate it? Because it's very, very clear that the Rambam's formula, standing alone, is not a sufficient definition of how you give tzedakah. So apparently there's room for two different things. Like you divide, but I don't have a percentage. You divide, some of the money is there for tikkun hamidas, and some of the money is there to help as much as I can help. But we don't have a clear hagdara when is that. By the way, the same is true for averos. I'll give you a very interesting halacha, that sometimes we find in halacha that repeating an avera many times has a more detrimental effect on you than doing a bigger avera only once. Where do we see this? We actually see this famous halacha, right, by pikuach nefesh. There's a din that when a person is b'sakana and they have to violate Shabbos or Yom Kippur, whatever it is, so of course you do it, it's not even a violation, but when you have a choice, you try to go with the lesser offense. Meaning, it's a shame that it's pashut. If I could give the guy kosher food, he can't eat trey. Well, that's obvious. But even if there's going to be an avera, you got to rank averas. What's more chomer, what's less chomer? Right? The well-known halacha. Hakal kal. And the Gemara in Yuma has all sorts of sugyas, how you rank things, how do you prioritize things. So in the Rishonim, there's the following machlekes. Let's imagine you have a chayla sheyesh le'sakana. The guy's going to die. It's Shabbos. It's Shabbos. He's going to die unless he has freshly prepared meat. He has to have meat. Again, whatever the medical situation is, this is what the doctor says. He must have meat. There is no meat in the house. You have two sources to give him. One is nevela, treif meat, that's there. The other is I could shecht a kosher animal on Shabbos. Now, cooking you're going to have to do anyway. Let's assume that whether it's nevela or whether it's kosher, you're going to cook it. So the cooking that's a done deal. So the question is it better to be meichel him nevela, or is it better to shecht a kosher animal? Now, in terms of severity of avera, l'chayra, being machal Shabbos, is an isser skila. Eating nevela is only a lo sasa. So one might have thought, better to shecht on Shabbos. I'm sorry, the other way around. Better to give him nevela than to shecht on Shabbos. And yet the halacha is, all the Rishonim say, we shecht rather than be meichel nevela. Now, there are different reasons that are given. The Ravid gives a reason that it's really psychological. That assuming that the chayla is a frum yid, the idea of eating nevela would be so repulsive to him that he might vomit it up. So we shecht on Shabbos simply because we can assume that nevela will not be acceptable to him. Although if he doesn't know, I'm not sure how you have that svara. But the Ran gives a different svara. The Ran says it's true that desecrating Shabbos is much more chamor than eating nevela. But with nevela, each kazayas that you eat is a separate avera. Chilul Shabbos is one action. So better to do one action of a severe avera than to do many actions of a less severe avera. The kamos, the quantity of action, is machriya. It overrides, in terms of severity, it overrides the eichos. So l'chayra, I would suggest that is fundamentally the converse of the Rambam's point about tzedakah. Right? Giving tzedakah many times in small amounts has a greater impact on me in a positive way than giving one big tzedakah. So who had din by averos, doing many averos, has a bigger impact on my neshama than doing one big avera and the like. Right, so that's what the Rishonim say. Now there are other reasons there's still yet another reason. They say that Shabbos is sutra, other averos are duchuya, meaning the argument goes, based on different drashos, that when you do malacha on Shabbos to help a chayla, it's not a malacha, it's not chilul Shabbos at all. It's legamri mutter. Nevela, the pshat is you're doing an aveira which is permitted for pikuach nefesh. In other words, so the difference would be, therefore, nevela is an aveira that's nitche because of pikuach nefesh. Shabbos is hutra, so hutra for sure would be better to do than dechuya. But either way, all the Rishonim, for different reasons, all the Rishonim say it is better to shecht on Shabbos. Alrighty. So this is the idea that the Midos are based on the Gufa HaNefesh, the Maisim are Lefi HaRuach, and then he draws an analogy based on the commentary in Mishlei. Kamo sheharochev al hasus, yachel lahachrichai leilech b'derech hayasher al yidei yagia. If you are riding on a horse, right? So the horse is very strong. The horse is much stronger than the rider. But with the right pulls, you can direct the horse to wherever you want to go, even if it's a bad horse, a disobedient horse. So too, even if your nefesh has bad midas, the kayach of the ruach, which is the ratzain, can direct it in all sorts of positive ways. And what eventually happens is that the nefesh itself gets trained. Again, horse and rider, right? The ruach is mechanech, the nefesh, and the like. Now, then, in Sifvav, mitzad haguf v'hanefesh, ha'adam hu garua mikol chai. So this is interesting. In terms of just looking at the guf and the nefesh, we are inferior to animals, right? Animals are stronger than us. They can run faster than us. They can pull greater weight. So mitzad the guf and the nefesh, animals will often have a great superiority to human beings. But the ruach and the neshama is what makes us great. Our greatness comes from the ruach and the neshama, not from the nefesh and the guf itself. Although the one thing one thing human beings do have, human beings generally have a longer life expectancy than most animals. So maybe that's the one biological thing that we have. But again, that may be connected. The duration of life may in fact be connected to the ruach and the neshama rather than the nefesh itself. Okay. Now, Sif Zai, and again, I do remember now that we looked at this, he says that if a person, right, so because the midas are things you're born with, right, you're born with it. Whether you root it in DNA or whatever you want to call it, people are born a certain way. You have a certain teva. The teva is the kayach of your nefesh, right? The guf and the nefesh. So you have to change it. So he says, lo yeh, and we just said the ruach is the kayach that allows you to change the teva of the nefesh. But it's important when you change it, lo yelech neged hateva legamri. Ki lo yiskayim biyadai, rak tzarech lehischanech leilech b'derech hayosher al pi tivai, lemashal mi shenailad b'mazel madim shu muchrech lio shofech damim, az yesh biyadol hischanech lio sheichet shu beinoni o moel shu tzadik v'lo liyais listim. V'zeh shekasuv, I'll go back, chanoch l'naro pi darkai, gam ki yaskin l'yosherin. So again, this is a very, very important teaching and a very well-known teaching. This is a teaching that I'm sure all of you have heard, probably even more than once. And this is taken from the Gran Mishlei. And I'll start with the pasuk at the end. Famous pasuk, beautiful pasuk. Chanoch l'nar al pi darko. Train a young person according to his way. And if you train him according to his way, gam ki yaskin, even when he gets old, lo yasor mimena, he will not turn away from the chinuch that you gave him. And the gra is masbir. This has now become the. It's interesting. It's not the only pshat in the pasuk. There are other pshatim in the pasuk, but this has become, the gra's pshat has become the standard havana of the pasuk, and that is every person is born with a certain derech in life, a certain pathway. I have my personality. I have my Midos. And the Midos might sometimes be bad. They might be negative. A person might be born with a propensity to get angry or to be egotistic or selfish. And we have to be mechanech. We have to train our children, train ourselves to improve ourselves. But we have to work within the basic personality framework. You can't have a chinuch that goes totally against the person's nature. You have to have a chinuch that initially at least accommodates that nature, and then it could get changed and improved or refined. Lot. Because if you try to radically change the nature, then the chinuch is not going to be mekoyim. Maybe the kid will obey because he's afraid, afraid of Abba, whatever it would be. But as soon as Abba's not in the picture, whatever it would be, drop everything. You got to work with the teva that you have, and the Gemara brings, although it doesn't say here that it's a Gemara in Shabbos, but it is a Gemara. I mean, the mashal he gives is not the Gemara's mashal. The mashal he gives is a Gemara in Masechah Shabbos. When Chazal talk about the teva you're born with, they often refer to it as you're born under a certain mazel. Now, it's not clear how literally we take that, but there was an idea that you're born a certain way because you're born under a certain constellation. Now, Chazal talk about astrology, constellations, mazales, are mashpia on people. There are kashas, the Rambam says in some letters, no such thing as astrology, etc., but Chazal talk about it. And they say, if you are born under the mazel of Ma'adim, the red mazel. The red mazel is the planet Mars, right? There are different months that certain planets are at the ascendancy, etc. So it says you're born under the red planet, your nature will be bloodlust. You will love blood. Right? Some people faint when they see blood. Right? I mean, I know actually more than one person who wanted to go to medical school. Maybe it's a little sad. And because they fainted at the sight of blood, they decided they had to do something else and the like. Right? But if you're born under Madim, you can go to medical school. But it says, you got to be careful. You got to be careful. He who was born under Madim will either be a shochet, or a mohel, or a murderer. I love blood. Now, what the Gemara is saying is, you don't take someone who loves blood and try to train them to despise blood. Rather, you say, okay, you love blood, let's find something good. We can say we could add a doctor to it, right? We'll add something good that you do with your personality instead of trying to squelch you. And the way the Gemara says it is that he says a listim, meaning a highway robber, a murderer, that's a rasha. The moel is the tzaddik, the shochet is the benoni. The shochet is middle. It's not the tzaddik of a moel, but you try to do it. So this is a very important yesod in chinuch. I mean, you can come up with a million examples. Sometimes people have very lengthy Shabbos meals, and they can be very good, very chashuv. Torah, semiros, etc. But you have an 8-year-old kid who's a little hyperactive, whether it's technically ADD or whatever it is, but he can't sit still. So you say, I'm mechanech you. You have to sit at this table for 4 hours until we finish. That's not right. The kid will go absolutely crazy. And what will happen, or what might happen, not necessarily will happen, is he may grow up to hate Shabbos. Shabbos, I gotta sit at a table for 4 hours. I'm going out of my head. Elamai, you give him opportunities to run around, and you try to incorporate some mitzvahs, that he could be the one who sets the table, he could be the one that sets the chairs, or whatever it would be. Same thing in yeshiva. Of course, the tachlis of all yeshiva learning is to sit and learn. We sit and learn, but sometimes people don't have what's called the zitzfleish, the ability to learn for many, many hours. So you try to find avenues and outlets where their energies could be used. Maybe they could, arrange malava malkas or whatever it is, chesed projects and the like. right? That's all chanoch lenar al pi darkei. I think I mentioned a word from Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, which is very controversial, so I repeat several times as I say this word. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, so it's not me, because I don't want to get blamed. But he says, by Yaakov and Esav, the pasuk says in Toldos, they were twins. Vayigdalu hana'arim, the young men grew up, and Esav became a hunter, and Yaakov was the Ishtam, the perfect person, Yoshev Oholim, who dwelt in the tent, which we understand to mean the tent of learning Torah. So first says, this was the problem. Vayigdalu hana'arim, Yitzchak and Rivka tried to raise their twins the same way. They're twins. People like to dress twins the same way. In the Haredi world, they dress all the kids the same way, but twins for sure. You dress the same way. Now, here's the thing. So Yitzchak puts Yaakov and Esav in the base medrash. And say, learn 12 hours a day. For Yaakov, that was perfect. That's exactly what Yaakov was. But Esav needed more basketball. Esav needed to run. Esav needed to jog. But Vayigdalu hana'arim, when you try to make Esav and Yaakov the same, not only will you not get Esav to be a Yaakov, you won't get Esav to be the potential tzaddik that he could have been. Rav Hirsch actually says that Esav potentially could have been a tzaddik in the sense of a helper of Yaakov, like a supporter of Torah, like a Yisachar Zavulun type of partnership that happened later. But Esav rebelled because he was forced into a mold that was not matim. Now again, some people don't like this word because who are we? How dare we even? We're criticizing the parenting decisions of the avos and the imais. Let's talk about chutzpah. Okay, I hear. So that's why it's a controversial pshat in the pasuk. But just because it's a controversial pshat in the pasuk does not mean it's a controversial thought. The thought, b'etzem, is a totally valid thought, even if one would not necessarily apply it to the Yaakov and Esav type of situation. And really, this is what the Gemara is saying. The Gemara is saying, "Chanayich l'nar pi darkei." I got to work with your derech. I got to work with your personality. Now that doesn't mean, there are no changes, right? That goes back to the earlier point that eventually the Ruach is mashpia on the Nefesh, and Midos change, but it has to be kind of a gradual way. And initially, you don't try to force something, like force a round peg into a square hole, because then it just gets broken, it gets distorted, and the like. So that's a very, very important yesod in chinuch. And the truth is, it also applies to us that you don't set goals that are beyond what you are right now. You have to go la'at. So you don't say just like you wouldn't say again. The physical body is a very good analogy. Just like a person who's out of shape is not going to say, "Oh, tomorrow morning I'm going to run a 26-mile marathon." Can't do that. Or tomorrow morning I'm going to lift a 400-pound weight. Can't do that. You start small. You challenge yourself. You go beyond your comfort zone, so to speak, but only a little beyond your comfort zone, right? If you only stay with what you're comfortable with, you never change. But if you take on too much, it's going to destroy you. So you have to be careful to kind of go beyond what you're doing in different ways, but in a more moderate way. Now I did mention, again, forgive me for reviewing, but again, we were in Zmanim for a while. I did mention that Rav Tzadok seems to take a different approach. It's not clear if he could fully reconcile this. Rav Tzadok talks about the need in life to make sudden changes. Rav Tzadok talks about the idea that Yetzias Mitzrayim was in a matzav of chipazon. What is chipazon? Chipazon means hurry. You got to get out now. You don't have a minute to wait. Right? You didn't have time to let your dough rise. And Rav Tzadok says, given the idea that the word Mitzrayim is not just a reference to Egypt, but it refers to Meitzar, limitations, boundaries, constrictions. He says, for a person to have their Yetzias Mitzrayim, it has to be b'chipazon. You can't kind of dawdle. You can't say, do a little this, a little that. You got to make sudden changes. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give you siyata d'shmaya. So the Gra seems to be emphasizing gradualism. Rav Tzadok emphasizes suddenness. Is that a stira really? I'm not sure. It may not be a stira. In other words, it may very well be that Rav Tzadok is saying, don't spend a lot of time thinking about positive changes. You got to do it immediately. But maybe he would be moda that the change would be incremental. In other words, it's two different nekudas. Rav Tzadok's concern is that when a person says, I got to think this out a little bit, and they think, and they think, and they think, and they think, they wind up not moving. So Rav Tzadok says, like Yetzias Mitzrayim, you got to move suddenly. But moving suddenly is not the same as moving to an extreme. So I'm not sure if there's a steer or a machlokas here, or indeed the Gra would also be made that. There's a bechina of chipazon in making the change, but the Gra says the changes themselves have to be gradual. And again, I mean, here in Ohr Somayach, we've seen this problem over and over and over and over again, where people want to make dramatic, drastic changes, which are in a good direction. They are in a good direction, but there were too much at the time. And what happens, unfortunately, often is the case, that people fall and they wind up in a worse place than they were before they made this good, so-called good change, right? So it's very, very important, the notion of gradualism, right? So this is a big yesod. Now, in Sif Ches, we go on to another point, which is also a big chiddush. And this, interestingly enough, is not from Mishlei. If you look at the end, this is from the Gra on Brachos. Now, it's interesting. The Gra did not write a Perish on Maseches Brachos. But the Gra did write a Sefer on the Agadata in Maseches Brachos. It's called Imrei Noam. It is largely Kabbalistic. If you were to get a hold of the Imrei Noam, it wouldn't be that comprehensible to us. But we do have a Perish of the Gra on all of the Agadatas in Maseches Brachos. And here is a teaching abstracted from the Kabbalistic terminology, just the teaching itself, from the Perish of the Gra in Brachos, that says the following: Yesh mi shenafsho tova beteva b'midaiseha v'yaf al pikein hu rasha. Sometimes you have a person who, Baruch Hashem, has wonderful Midos, not necessarily because he worked on it, but because he won the lottery. He was born with good Midos. They come from the Nefesh, right? Born with beautiful, attractive Midos. But unfortunately, he's a Rasha, right? Machal Shabbos. Again, I'm not addressing the issue of a modern day Chiloni. I'm not even suggesting we would use the label of a Rasha. But whatever a Rasha is, right? He's a Rasha. So what does Hashem do with such a person that has beautiful Midas, B'teva, but he's also a Rasha? So the Gras, by the way, there's another passage which I think is later in the Even Shleima, that it's not just, it happens to be. He actually says it is sometimes min hashamayim that Rishayim have beautiful Midos. That creates a Nissan. And the truth is we see this sometimes, in which sometimes the personality of a Rasha might be more attractive than the external personality of a tzaddik. It might be, and that's a great Nissan, So the Gemara writes later that that's a certain Nissan that Hashem puts in the world. But whatever it is, what does Hashem do with such a person? So he says, Lazeh nosnim lo kol secharo ba'olam hazeh, shelo yiyeh lo chelek liolam haba. So such a person might very well lose his olam haba, but Hashem is still going to reward him for the good midos that he has, so he will get his reward in olam hazeh. either through wealth, through acclaim, through charisma, through admiration. And he says the following reason. Shahaya naka lo ma'ot lasas taiv v'lai ratzos. This is interesting. The Gemara seems to say that having good Midos doesn't only mean you're a nice guy, but it means that serving Hashem would have been easier for you. Meaning, it's not so hard for you to do mitzvahs. Your Midos are not so nimshach to all of the things that take a person away from mitzvahs. So the Gemara says, the averos of such a person are much more chamor, simply because the Yetzer Hara that would take him away from Hashem is weaker, and he still listened to it. Interesting idea, right? It was easier for him to do mitzvahs, and he didn't do it. The onus is going to be much greater. This is a great klal. We see it from many, many Gemaras, that an avera that is easier to be poresh from, the onesh is greater than an avera which is hard to be poresh from. The Gemara in Menachos says, Gadol einsha shel lavan. Yeah, I'm surprised he doesn't bring it. Yaiser me einsha shel techelas. Without getting into the issue of techelas today, forget about that. But when there was techelas, for sure. So in your tzitzis, right, you had chutim of lavan, pure white wool, and then you had chutim of techelas, whether it's 2 out of the 8, or 1 out of the 8, or 4 out of the 8, different shitas. So let's assume a person doesn't want to spend the money for tzitzis. He has a 4-cornered garment, but I don't want to spend money for tzitzis. So he doesn't have lavan, he doesn't have techelas, or let's say he spends it on lavan, but doesn't want to spend it on techelas. So the Gemara says in Menachos, the onesh Hashem will give him for not fulfilling the mitzvah of tzitzis will be a greater onesh on the lavan than on the techelas. Reason? Techelas, then as now, is much more expensive than lavan. So, if I didn't do a mitzvah because it would cost me $100, that's less of an aveira, so to speak, than if I didn't want to do a mitzvah that would cost me $20. Because the Yetzer Hara is going to be weaker in that case. And therefore the onesh for bittul lavan is greater than the onesh of bittul techelas. And that's what the Gemara is saying. If a person was blessed with Midos tovos, and he still rebelled against Hashem, his onesh, his forfeiture of Olam Haba, is going to be much, much worse than the person who Nebuch had bad Midos and succumbed. Even then, he could have worked on it. Even then. But Lamaisa, it would have been a harder job. So if I fail to do a harder job, it's not as chomer in Hashem's eyes as a person who could have done something easily and didn't do it. Okay, so that's why he says. So apparently, when he talks about his nefesh is good b'midos, he also means that it's not such a big deal for him to learn, to daven. He could do it, but he says, I decided I don't want to do it. Okay, so the einish is much, much more in that way. And now he says a very ingenious pshat, the olav nemar. And on such a person is the meaning of a pasuk in Yeshayahu, Oy lenafsham ki gomlu lahem ra. Very ingenious. Alas to their nefesh, which has done them bad. Speaking to the Russia. Alas to the nefesh of the Russia, alas to the Russia rather, whose nefesh has hurt them. What do you mean the nefesh has hurt them? Yeah, it's the goodness of your nefesh that winds up hurting you because the onus is going to be worse. Right? It's the goodness of the nefesh that's going to do bad to you in that sense. Aval, but the other person, mi shenafshay ra, a person who beteva has bad midas. A person has an atiyah to anger and to taiva and to laziness and to distractibility. So he says in such a case, yesh leitamid milchames hayetzer. he has a hard life. He's always fighting these Yetzer Haras. So number one, if he is successful, the reward is much greater. Lefum Sara Agra, according to the pain, is the reward. That's if he's successful. But now look at this. But what if he's not successful? So says the Gra, Af im lefamim nichshel bi'avera chas v'shalom. There are going to be times where this will overpower me, and I may be nichshel bi'avera chas v'shalom. But ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu nichnas imai lifnim mishuras adin. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think there must be a printing mistake here. I mean, lifnim mishuras adin means God will treat him beyond the letter of the law, meaning in a merciful way. I think the point here is Hashem will look at him with rachamim and treat him lifnim mishuras adin. Kamasha kasav. Gadol havtacha she'evtiach l'nashim yosher min anashim mibnei shehein misitra dismala hakarav l'cheit. Okay, again, this gets into a thing. There's a Gemara in Brachos that says the reward that God will give to women for doing their job is greater than the reward that God will give to men for doing their job. And the reason is, in certain inyanim, women have a bigger Yetzer Hara. And therefore, to overcome a stronger Yetzer Hara is a greater sechar than overcoming a weaker. And he brings Kabbalistically that men come from the right side of Hashem, which is the side of Chesed, and women's Neshama comes from Gevura, the left side of Hashem, which is Gevura. And Gevura has a certain distance from the ultimate essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So he says, Nashim are karav l'chet, whatever that means exactly, at least certain chatoim and the like, and therefore they will get more sechar. Again, l'fum Sarah Agra, but the chiddush of the Gra is not that I get more reward if I have a stronger Yetzer Hara, that's in Chazal, but the other way too, that when I commit an Aveira, it will be judged lifnim mishuras adin in a way that's not going to happen for a person who didn't have this great struggle. So there's lefum Sarah Agra in terms of Averis too, and not just in terms of mitzvos that a person does. Okay, all right. Maybe we'll stop here, and I imagine there's no Ma'ariv now, right? So Ma'ariv is okay.